Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and I am severely out of practice in filming. I say that because I just spent 5 whole minutes filming the beginning of this wrap up without using my microphone. So I'm going to try and recreate what I just talked about. Also, further context, it is an incredibly rainy day, which is very much needed. This is the third major heat wave that I have experienced recently on two sides of the Atlantic. So this rain is very much needed. I am wearing long pants for the first time in weeks, but it also means the frizz in it is incredibly real. And I could not stand my hair, so it is up in a claw clip at the moment. And then background context on the month of June. The month of June was insane in both good and bad ways. The bad ways were the end of school year chaos that inevitably happens every year, but this year it seemed 10 times worse. And then I had 24 hours off, and then we left for London, which was amazing. It was wonderful. But I finally am feeling like, okay, I'm home. I can settle into a routine now. I can actually rest. So, all that to say, a lot of my reading in June was digital reading. That was the only way that it was going to happen. So, I'm going to start with my digital reads first, and then I will get into the two physical books that I also finished last month. Also, since it is Jane Austen July, there will be Jane Austen July content coming up. There will also be a London book haul coming up. But in the spirit of Jane Austen July, I would like to show off my t-shirt, which you can't really see very much of. But if you can make out that feather print, yes, this is the Hugh Thompson peacock cover for Pride and Prejudice. This was either a birthday or a Christmas gift from Marissa of Blatantly Bookish last year, I believe. So, firstly, as per usual, while I am working during the school year, the majority of my reading comes from audiobooks. So, I read two whole audiobooks and most of another one during the month of June. The first two were the next in the Emma M. Lyons series by Beth Brower. Those were volumes 6 and 7. I love this series so much. They are so perfect. Given that they are books 6 and 7, I can really tell you nothing of what actually happens, and they are very much slice of life anyway. There is plot, but there isn't plot at the same time. But if you're unfamiliar, these are fictional diaries of a late Victorian young woman who is fighting for independence, both legally, financially, and the insane cast of characters that surrounds her in her family, her friends, her neighbors in the fictional neighborhood of St. Crispians, and they are delightful. They are funny, they are deep and moving, they just have everything. And the end of volume 6 became foot-kickingly good in terms of where one of the romance plot lines went, and oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this next whole, I don't want to say chapter because that's not right, but this next sequence of books that will develop that storyline. Yes, I do now follow Beth Brower's newsletter, and I was so pleased to hear that she has plans for there to be many, many more Emma M. Lyon books, including another one. Volume 9, I think, will be released later this year. I do still have to listen to Volume 8, but I'm holding off on that until August when I start going back to school and commuting more regularly, since I will have the most time to actually listen to it at that point. My driving is becoming much shorter distances, and I'm doing much less of it now that I'm not working every day. So once I finished volume 7, I still needed an audiobook to get me through to the end of the school year. So I decided to continue my reread of Harry Potter via audiobook since I don't mind having to stop in the middle of the story. So I am about 80% of the way through the final Harry Potter book as narrated by Stephen Fry. Then, as we left for London, I realized that rather than packing a load of books, especially when I was planning on buying a load of books, I would just pack my iPad, and this would be the perfect opportunity for me to read all of these arcs that had been stacking up on my NetGalley app. So that is precisely what I did. So let me walk you through the ones that I read. The first was the new Emma Orchard Regency romance novel called How, I always get this title wrong, How to Not Marry a Lord, where the premise was very interesting. We have three sisters, I believe, who are willed a great deal of money from an old aunt, and they are thrilled about this. But one of the stipulations of her will is that they cannot inherit this money if they marry within a year of receiving this inheritance. And the girls see nothing wrong with this. They move into her old mansion house. And of course, find men on their doorstep. And I will say some of the plot lines do take an interesting turn. The main romance plotline was pretty standard. There were some nice touches to it, but overall there was nothing really memorable about it. The one that stuck out to me most was the female-female plotline that developed with two of the other characters, mainly because I was incredibly worried about how that plotline was going to develop. It didn't seem like it was developing in an entirely positive direction. Ultimately, I think she redeemed herself with that one. Still not entirely sure how I feel about it, but it wasn't as terrible as I thought it was going to be. And I realize that sounds incredibly vague and awful, but I can't be more specific than that without giving away spoilers. But if you have also read it, I would be happy to discuss it further with you. Then I read Checking You Out by, I believe, Jennifer Chen. Pardon me if I got the author's name wrong. I will have a picture of it over here. And this is a young adult romance novel featuring very bookish characters. So, of course, I was intrigued. And overall, it was a cute read. That really was my overarching feeling about it, that it was just cute. I have come to the conclusion that young adult romance just is not for me anymore. I really and truly have outgrown it now. But I think if I were much younger, it would have been more exciting to me. I thought the diversity rep was incredibly good. I thought its representation of bullying and also healing from that bullying was really important and very well done. And we also have a load of bookish teenagers and lots of cats, and those are both things that I love. But overall, I am just not the target audience anymore. But it was still a cute, fun read. I then moved on to Most Ardently Yours by Freya Sampson. I loved this book. It was so good. We follow a young woman who is living in London and stumbles into this old bookstore and gets into a big fight with the owner who about romance novels, and she discovers a copy of Pride and Prejudice on the shelves and then leaves. And later on discovers that she has read Mr. Darcy into existence. And now she has to shelter him and house him and teach him modern ways, all while trying to figure out how she did this and how she can get him back into the book. And things snowball out of control from there. I loved this. I thought the time slip nature was really well done, possibly even better than Confessions of a Jane Austen Addict or Lost in Austen. I really enjoyed this a lot more than Lost in Austen. I have never been a fan of that show. I remember I watched it when I was 17 and I just hated how some of the characters and the consequences were portrayed. It just made me so deeply uncomfortable how bleak it became. This novel does not do that, though. There are consequences for all of the interference with the Pride and Prejudice plot, and they are dire, but they don't feel as bleak and horrible as Lost in Austen did it, which I really appreciated. I also loved its discussion of the romance genre itself and its merits and the self-confidence arc that our heroine has to go on throughout the novel. I really, really loved this. I highly encourage you to check it out when it does come out, which I believe will be soon. Then I read The House of Boleyn by Tracy Borman, which I now know is already out in the UK, as we went to both the Tower of London and Hampton Court again, and it was on sale in both of those gift shops. But I don't believe it's out in the US yet, but it probably will be, I want to say August. This is, as you might have guessed, a book about the Boleyn family, and by extension, the Howards, as they were cousins. But it is fiction. This might, in fact, be Tracy Borman's first fiction novel. She is a highly respected Tudor historian, and in fact, she is one of the curators at Historic Royal Palaces. As we were touring Hampton Court, she did large portions of the audio guides, which was a lot of fun considering I was reading this book at the time. So, given her job, of course, this novel is incredibly well researched, but it is also very well written. None of it really came across as a shock to me, as I've been obsessed with the Tudors for most of my life. So there wasn't anything in this story that I didn't already know, but it was still a very enjoyable read. It was a fresh perspective on those very well known events, at least well known to me. The one thing I will say, she does insert a few completely fictional characters just to give us some other perspectives. There were two female servants who we hear from a great deal. They were fine. Their I enjoyed what they added to the novel, but we also hear from one fictionalized male character, and she says in the acknowledgments that he was someone that was mentioned in, say, household accounts and things, but we don't really know very much about him, so she embellished him as a character. And I have no problem with that. My problem, unfortunately, and this was something that she couldn't really do anything about, given that he was a real figure, is that his name was far too similar to two other main players in the Tudor saga. His name, I believe, was Robert Cranwell, and that to me is far too similar to Thomas Cromwell and Thomas Cranmer. So I had a really hard time keeping track of who she was talking about anytime he was on the scene. But like I said, not entirely her fault, still a wonderful read. If you are looking for a new Tudor novel to enjoy, I do highly recommend that one. And then the final arc that I finished was a nonfiction book about Native American history and culture called We've Been Here the Whole Time by Joey Clift. And this will be published in October, around Columbus Day, fittingly enough. This is quite fun. It's quite short, and it's an illustrated guide to Native American history and culture and a lot of the frankly stupid questions that white people tend to ask Native Americans. And he does really lean into the humor side of things, but all of his history facts are very well researched. The illustrations and the writing style are quite pithy and quite funny. And I really appreciated how this book will be an excellent jumping off point if you want to explore more of Native American history or culture, as the last thing that he does is list a huge number of other Native American creators. That sounds like I'm limiting it to just social media. It really is every kind of artist, visual artists, films, nonfiction books, fiction authors, social media influencers, everything. He lists a huge number of native people to follow in a huge number of areas. So you can find an area that you really enjoy and that you are passionate about and follow these people in that track, which I thought was really cool. So, like I said, that book isn't available yet, but when it does come out, I do also encourage you to pick it up if it sounds interesting. Then we come to the two physical books that I read in June. The first was A Dance for the King by Anton Dubek. Yes, I finally finished this in June. Did it take me forever? Yes. Should it have? No. This is the seventh, I think, book in his Buckingham Hotel series. So again, I can't tell you too much about the plot, but it is very Downton Abbey-esque, but it's set around a London hotel during World War II, and we follow many of the different members of staff, their romantic entanglements, and there is a heavy amount of ballroom dance involved, given that Anton Dubek is a ballroom dancer. I love this series so much. This was delightful, agita-inducing, but still fabulous. I have now picked up the most recently published book in the series, but at the time, I felt as though I had finished the series. So that was a job well done. And then, speaking of finishing series, I picked up A Game of Scandal by Laura Wood, and this was the last in this series. There were three altogether. And so we still follow the Aviary, which is a late Victorian agency of female spies trying to ultimately help other women, but also the government at large. In each book, we follow different characters that are linked to the aviary, but as we go further in, we do still get glimpses of our original main characters as well. This one I also really enjoyed. I love Laura Woods' books. The adventure is well done, all of the characters are beautifully painted, the romance plot lines are wonderful. And here we follow Felicity Vane, who is the sister of one of our main characters from book one, who is an incredible mathematician, and she is consistently fighting with her brother to attend university, but their mother will not allow it. So she decides one day to go gambling. Because she is a mathematician, she becomes an adept card counter and very adept at games of chance. So she decides to try and use this to go to a gambling den that allows women that she has heard about to try and earn some money. So maybe she could pay for that university tuition herself. And in that gambling den, she opens herself up to being targeted by a criminal and also finds romance for herself at the same time. And 500 pages of romance and adventure ensue. These are delightful. I'm so sad that there aren't any more, but I am looking forward to whatever Laura Wood publishes next. So that sums up my chaotic month of June, both what was going on in my life and what I managed to read. Let me know down below if you have recommendations for me or questions for me based on the books that I described here or attempted to describe. I feel like I was extra rambly in this one, so do not feel badly if you have extra questions. Also, let me know what your favorite read of the month was, as I'm always looking for new suggestions, and it's always wonderful to chat with you all. Also, let me know if you would like to see any future videos based on some of the items I described here. Until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye, everyone.